Welcome to SleepMora. Tonight, let me guide you through a gentle story from history. Close your eyes, relax, and let the past carry you to a peaceful sleep. Tonight, we'll explore the fascinating world of medieval Europe, where life moved to a different rhythm, governed by seasons, church bells, and the rising sun. Close your eyes and let me transport you to a time when the world was smaller, communities closer, and every day was a testament to human resilience. Dawn in a medieval village. Picture, if you will, a small village nestled in the rolling hills of 12th century England. The year is 1147, and the first light of dawn creeps slowly across thatched roofs and narrow dirt paths. There are no alarm clocks here, no electric light to disturb the natural rhythm of sleep and waking. Instead, the village awakens to the gentle crow of roosters and the distant tolling of church bells. Our story begins with Agnes, a peasant woman whose calloused hands tell the story of countless mornings just like this one. She stirs in her straw-filled mattress, sharing the single room of her cottage with her husband, William. Their 3 children, and often their animals during the harsh winter months. The walls are made of wattle and daub, a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung that, while humble, provides surprising insulation against the elements. As Agnes rises, her bare feet touch the cold, packed earth floor. There are no wooden floors here, no carpets or rugs. The ground beneath her home is the same earth that yields their crops, swept clean, but forever bearing the smell of the farmyard. She wraps her woolen kirtle around her shoulders, a simple, practical garment that she will wear for days, perhaps weeks, before washing. The medieval world operated on a schedule dictated entirely by natural light. Candles were precious, made from tallow or beeswax, and used sparingly. Most families owned perhaps 2 or 3 candles, saved for the darkest winter evenings or special occasions. So Agnes's day begins with the sun, as it has for countless generations before her. Her first task is to rekindle the fire that has been carefully banked through the night. Fire is life in medieval times. It provides warmth, light, and the means to cook food. Losing a fire meant starting anew with flint and steel, a laborious process that could take precious minutes. Agnes blows gently on the glowing embers, feeding them dried twigs and straw until flames dance once again in the simple stone hearth. The smoke rises through a hole in the thatched roof. There are no chimneys in peasant homes. That luxury belongs to the wealthy. Instead, smoke finds its way out as best it can, leaving everything in the cottage tinged with a perpetual scent of wood smoke. Agnes's eyes water slightly, as they do every morning, but this is simply the way of things. As the fire grows stronger, Agnes places a simple clay pot over the flames. Breakfast will be pottage, a thick porridge made from whatever grains they have stored. Oats, barley, perhaps some peas. She adds water from a wooden bucket, filled the evening before from the village well. This water is cloudy, sometimes questionable, but it's what they have. The concept of purified water is unknown. They simply trust in providence and their strong constitutions. The morning routine. While Agnes tends the fire, her husband, William, has already left for the fields. Medieval agricultural life operates on a schedule as old as civilization itself. The sun's position dictates not just when to wake, but when to plant, when to harvest, when to rest. William has perhaps 6 hours of good working light ahead of him, and every moment counts. But let us follow Agnes as she begins her own complex dance of daily survival. After stirring the pottage, she steps outside to tend their small vegetable garden. Medieval peasants grew what they could in every available space: onions, leeks, cabbage, and beans. These vegetables would supplement their diet of bread, porridge, and occasionally, if they were fortunate, a bit of bacon or cheese. The morning air is crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from dozens of similar cottages. Agnes can hear her neighbors beginning their own daily routines, the lowing of cattle being led to pasture, the rhythmic thunk of axes splitting wood, the chatter of children already at play in the dusty lanes. Medieval villages were incredibly social places by necessity. Privacy was a luxury few could afford. Families lived in close quarters. Neighbors knew each other's business, and everyone depended on everyone else for survival. Agnes waves to her neighbor, Margot, who is already at her spinning wheel, turning wool into thread that will eventually become clothing. The children begin to stir inside the cottage. In medieval times, childhood was brief. By age 7 or 8, children were expected to contribute meaningfully to the family's survival. Agnes's eldest son, Thomas, age 10, will spend his day helping his father in the fields. Her daughter, Mary, 8 years old, will help Agnes with household tasks: spinning, weaving, tending the garden, and caring for their few animals. Their youngest, little Edmund, only 5, still has a year or two before he too will be pressed into regular service. For now, he plays with simple toys. Perhaps a wooden hoop, a cloth doll stuffed with straw, or smooth stones collected from the riverbank. Medieval children learned to find joy in the simplest things. 4 elaborate toys were beyond the reach of peasant families. Agnes calls the children to breakfast. They gather around the small wooden table, really just a board placed across 2 trestles, and share the morning pottage from wooden bowls. There are no individual place settings, no forks. They eat with wooden spoons and their hands, sharing from common dishes. The pottage is filling but bland by modern standards. Salt is precious and expensive, used sparingly. Sugar is virtually unknown. Honey is the only sweetener, and even that is rare and precious. The family's diet consists mainly of grain-based foods, bread, porridge, and ale. Yes, ale. Even the children drink a weak ale with their meals, as it's often safer than water. The art of medieval housekeeping. After breakfast, Agnes begins the endless cycle of household tasks that will occupy her until sunset. Medieval housekeeping was not just about cleanliness, it was about survival. Every task had to be done by hand, with simple tools, and often in challenging conditions. First, she must deal with the family's clothing. Medieval people owned very few garments, perhaps 2 or 3 complete outfits at most. Agnes herself has her everyday kirtle, a slightly better dress for church and special occasions, and her winter cloak. Washing these precious garments was a major undertaking, done perhaps once a month or even less frequently. When washing day arrived, Agnes would join the other village women at the stream. They would bring their wooden paddles and homemade soap, a harsh mixture of animal fat and ash that cleaned reasonably well, but was rough on both fabric and skin. The women would spend hours beating the dirt from their clothing, rinsing in the cold stream water, and wringing out the heavy, wet wool. But today is not washing day. Instead, Agnes takes up her spindle and begins the never-ending task of creating thread. Every piece of clothing her family wears must be made by hand, from the initial spinning of wool or flax into thread, to the weaving of that thread into cloth, to the cutting and sewing of the final garment. Agnes sits in the doorway of her cottage, where the light is best, and begins the rhythmic motion of spinning. The spindle twirls in her fingers, transforming tufts of raw wool into fine, strong thread. This is meditative work, the kind of task that allows the mind to wander while the hands stay busy. She might spin 4 hours each day, creating the thread that will eventually become a new shirt for William or a warm cloak for the winter. Around her, the village hums with similar activity. Medieval communities were largely self-sufficient by necessity. The nearest town might be a day's walk away, and trade goods were expensive luxuries. So every village had its specialists. The blacksmith who forged tools and horseshoes, the miller who ground grain into flour, the carpenter who built and repaired homes, the baker who owned one of the few ovens large enough to bake bread for multiple families. Agnes can hear the rhythmic hammering from the blacksmith's forge, where Thomas the smith is repairing farming tools. The constant clang of metal on metal is one of the signature sounds of medieval village life. Everything made of iron or steel was precious, repaired again and again until it could no longer hold its shape. The medieval kitchen and food preparation. As the morning progresses, Agnes must begin thinking about the day's main meal. Medieval eating patterns were different from ours. They typically ate 2 main meals, one in the late morning and another in early evening. Breakfast was light, perhaps just bread and ale, while dinner was the substantial meal of the day. The medieval peasant diet was monotonous by our standards, but carefully designed to provide maximum nutrition from available resources. Bread was the foundation of every meal, but not the soft, white bread we know today. Medieval peasant bread was dark, dense, and often gritty. Made from whatever grains were available: barley, oats, rye, and, if they were fortunate, some wheat. Agnes kneads her dough on the wooden table, working the coarse flour into a sticky mass. This flour is nothing like modern refined flour. It contains pieces of grain hull, sometimes small stones from the grinding process, and often other, less appetizing additions. But it's nutritious and filling, and that's what matters. The bread will be baked in the village's communal oven, owned by the lord of the manor. Agnes, like all the villagers, must pay a fee to use this oven. Another reminder of the complex web of obligations that defined medieval life. She carried her loaves to the bakehouse later, where they'll join dozens of others. Each family's bread marked with a distinctive pattern to identify it after baking. While the bread rises, Agnes tends to their small collection of animals. Most peasant families kept a few chickens, perhaps a pig, and if they were prosperous, a cow or goat. These animals were not pets. They were investments, sources of food, and essential parts of the family's survival strategy. The chickens peck around the cottage yard, searching for insects and scraps. Their eggs are precious, often sold or traded rather than eaten by the family. A laying hen represents a steady, if small, source of income. The eggs that are unsold might be preserved in lard or buried in salt for the lean winter months. Their pig, if they have one, is perhaps the most valuable animal they own. Pigs can eat almost anything. Kitchen scraps, fallen fruit, even refuse that other animals won't touch. They grow fat quickly and provide meat that can be preserved through smoking, salting, or storing in lard. The autumn pig slaughter is one of the most important events in the peasant calendar, providing protein that will last through the winter. Agnes scatters grain for the chickens and checks their simple roosts for eggs. She finds 2 today, a small blessing that brings a smile to her weathered face. These eggs might become part of today's dinner, mixed into a simple custard or used to enrich the ever-present pottage. Work, community, and social structure. As the sun climbs higher, Agnes can see her husband William in the distance, working in the Lord's domain. The medieval agricultural system was built on a complex web of obligations and reciprocal duties. William is not a free farmer. He's a villain, bound to the land and owing specific services to his lord. 3 days a week, William must work the Lord's land without payment. This is called labor, and it's one of the fundamental obligations of medieval serfdom. He might be plowing fields, harvesting crops, repairing fences, or maintaining roads. The remaining days he can work his family's small plot, but even this land isn't truly his. It belongs to the Lord, granted for use in exchange for service and loyalty. This system, called manorialism, might seem oppressive to modern eyes, but it provided a form of security. The Lord was obligated to protect his peasants, to provide land for farming, and to maintain order. In a world without police, without government social services, without insurance, the manor system created a safety net of mutual obligation. Agnes can see other women working in their gardens, their children playing nearby. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and privacy was almost impossible. But this also meant that help was always available when needed. If Agnes became ill, her neighbors would care for her children. If William was injured, other men would help with his work. The village itself is laid out in a pattern that has remained unchanged for generations. The Lord's manor house sits on a hill overlooking the settlement, a stone structure that represents wealth and power. Below, it cluster the peasant cottages, each with its small garden plot. The church stands at the village center, its bell tower the tallest structure for miles around. The church is more than just a place of worship. It's the center of medieval social life. Here, villagers gather for services, for meetings, for celebrations, and mourning. The church calendar dictates the rhythm of village life, with feast days and fast days, times of celebration and periods of solemn reflection. Agnes pauses in her spinning to listen to the church bell tolling the hour. Though peasants do unthink in terms of precise time, as we do. Instead, they mark the day by the position of the sun, the angle of shadows, the calls to prayer. Time moves more slowly in the medieval world, measured not in minutes, but in seasons, not in schedules, but in the eternal cycle of planting and harvest, health, medicine, and daily challenges. Life in medieval times was precarious in ways modern people can barely imagine. Agnes has already lost 2 children, one to fever in infancy, another to what we might now recognize as dysentery. In her world, death is a constant companion, striking without warning and often without explanation. Medieval medicine was a mixture of herbal knowledge, superstition, and religious faith. Agnes knows which plants might ease a fever, which herbs can help with childbirth, which roots might settle a stomach. This knowledge passes from woman to woman, grandmother to granddaughter, a precious inheritance more valuable than gold. When illness strikes, there are few options. The nearest physician might be days away and affordable only to the wealthy. Instead, Agnes and her neighbors rely on each other, on traditional remedies, and on prayer. The village wise woman, old Martha, knows more about healing than many trained doctors. She understands the properties of willow bark for pain, of chamomile for sleep, of various mushrooms and plants that can help or harm. But for all their knowledge, medieval people live with a level of physical discomfort that would shock us today. Dental care is primitive. A painful tooth is often simply pulled out with crude iron pliers. Broken bones might heal crooked. Infections that we could easily treat with antibiotics can become life-threatening. Agnes herself bears the marks of hard living. Her hands are permanently stained from dyes and rough with calluses. Her back aches from bending over the spinning wheel and working in the garden. She has scars from kitchen accidents, from cuts and burns that healed without proper medical care. Yet, there's a resilience to medieval people that's remarkable. They accept pain and hardship as part of life's natural order. They find joy in small pleasures, a good harvest, a successful birth, a feast day celebration. Their bodies are strong from constant physical work, their minds sharp from the need to constantly solve practical problems. Agnes checks on her youngest child, little Edmund, who has been coughing for several days. She prepares a simple remedy, hot water with honey and herbs, and makes him breathe the steam. It's the best medicine she can provide, and often such simple treatments are surprisingly effective. The medieval understanding of disease is very different from ours. They believe illness comes from bad air, malaria, from imbalances in the body's humors, from divine punishment for sin, or from malevolent spirits. Yet, their treatments, while based on different theories, often contain genuine wisdom. Many medieval herbal remedies have proven to have real medicinal properties. Afternoon tasks and community life. As the sun reaches its peak, Agnes joins other village women at the communal well. This is more than just a water-gathering expedition. It's a social event, a time for sharing news, discussing problems, and maintaining the complex web of relationships that hold the community together. The well is perhaps 50 yards from Agnes's cottage, a stone-lined pit that reaches down to the water table. The water is drawn up in leather buckets attached to ropes, a task that requires strength and skill. Agnes lowers her bucket carefully, listening for the splash that tells her it has reached water. Then begins the laborious process of hauling it back up. The water that emerges is not crystal clear. It may be cloudy with sediment, tinged with minerals, sometimes questionable in quality. But it's what they have, and medieval people have developed strong constitutions from a lifetime of drinking less than perfect water. They learn to let it settle, to strain it through cloth, to trust that God will protect them from harm. As the women work, they talk. Agnes learns that the miller's wife has given birth, her fourth child, and thankfully, this one seems healthy. She hears that traders passed through yesterday, bringing news from the outside world. There are rumors of war in distant lands, of a new king's coronation, of strange events in far-off cities. For medieval peasants, the world beyond their village is mysterious and largely irrelevant. Agnes has never traveled more than a day's walk from her birthplace. She knows the names of distant cities: London, Paris, Rome, but they might as well be on the moon for all the impact they have on her daily life. Yet information does trickle down through merchants, pilgrims, and wandering friars. Agnes knows that there are places where people live differently, where great cathedrals stretch toward heaven, where kings hold court in magnificent palaces. These stories fascinate her, but they also reinforce her understanding of her place in the world's great hierarchy. The water collected, Agnes returns home to find Mary helping with the day's weaving. Medieval children learned by doing, and Mary's small fingers are already skilled at the simple patterns that will become their family's clothing. She works at a small hand loom, creating narrow strips of cloth that will be sewn together to make garments. Weaving is one of the most important skills a medieval woman can possess. Every family needs clothing, bedding, and household linens, and all of these must be created from scratch. The process is incredibly time-consuming, from the initial preparation of wool or flax, through spinning, weaving, and finally sewing. A single garment might represent weeks or months of work. The medieval dinner and family life. As afternoon shadows lengthen, Agnes begins preparing the family's main meal of the day. This is dinner served when there's still good light to see by, usually in mid to late afternoon. The evening meal will be lighter, perhaps just bread and ale, eaten by firelight before bed. Today's dinner will be typical peasant fare. Agnes has prepared a pottage, thicker and more substantial than the morning's breakfast version. This one contains oats, barley, some dried peas, a precious bit of bacon for flavoring, and vegetables from their garden. She adds herbs, thyme, sage, parsley that she grows and dries herself. The bread she kneaded this morning has been baked in the village oven and returned, crusty and dark. Medieval bread was the foundation of every meal, so important that it was often used as plates, thick slices called trenchers, that soaked up juices and sauces. Before being eaten at the end of the meal, Agnes also prepares a simple ale, the staple drink of medieval Europe. This ale is much weaker than modern beer, with just enough alcohol content to make it safer than water. She brews it herself in large clay vessels using barley, hops, and whatever other ingredients she can find. The process is part art, part science, and part luck. The family gathers for dinner around their simple table. He washes in a wooden basin, a luxury that marks this family as reasonably prosperous as many peasants must make do with a stream or well for all their washing needs. Little Edmund climbs onto a wooden stool to reach the table. Medieval furniture is simple and functional. Stools instead of chairs, trestle tables that can be taken apart when needed, chests that serve as both storage and seating. Everything must serve multiple purposes in the cramped peasant cottage. They begin the meal with a prayer, thanking God for the food before them. Medieval Christianity permeates every aspect of life, and no meal begins without acknowledging divine providence, even in times of scarcity. And there are many such times. Peasants maintain their faith that God will provide. The food is simple but nourishing. The pottage provides protein from the peas and bacon, carbohydrates from the grains, and vitamins from the vegetables. The bread supplies additional calories and helps fill empty stomachs. The ale provides both nutrition and pleasure, one of the few luxuries in the peasant diet. Evening crafts and storytelling. After dinner, as daylight begins to fade, the family settles into their evening routine. This is the time for crafts, for mending, for the quieter tasks that don't require bright light. Agnes takes up her mending basket, filled with the endless repairs that keep their small wardrobe functional. Medieval clothing was built to last, but it took tremendous abuse. Working in fields, caring for animals, cooking over open fires, all of these activities were hard on fabric. Agnes examines William's tunic, looking for thin spots that need patching, tears that need mending, seams that need reinforcing. She works by the light of the fire, occasionally adding a precious candle when the work requires more precision. Her needle is made of bone or horn. Steel needles are expensive luxuries. The thread comes from her own spinning, and every stitch represents time and effort that cannot be wasted. Mary sits beside her mother, learning by watching and helping with simpler tasks. She might be mending tears in her own dress or helping to darn stockings. These skills are essential for survival. A woman who cannot sew, spin, and weave will struggle to keep her family clothed. Young Thomas works on a different kind of craft. He's carving a new handle for a farming tool, using a sharp knife and a piece of oak wood. Medieval peasants were remarkably skilled at making and repairing the tools they needed for survival. A good knife, properly cared for, might last a lifetime and be passed down from father to son. Little Edmund plays quietly with his simple toys, but he's also listening and learning. Medieval education happened around the family hearth through observation and participation rather than formal schooling. Very few peasant children learned to read or write. These skills were mostly confined to the clergy and nobility. Instead, they learned practical skills and absorbed the stories, songs, and traditions that connected them to their ancestors and their community. Agnes might tell a story passed down from her grandmother, or William might share a song learned from his father. These oral traditions were the medieval equivalent of books and entertainment, preserving history and culture in human memory. The stories they tell are a mixture of Christian teachings, folk tales, and local legends. There might be tales of saints and miracles, stories of brave knights and fair maidens, or local legends about the spirits that inhabit nearby woods and streams. These stories serve multiple purposes. They entertain, they teach moral lessons, and they help make sense of a world that often seems unpredictable and dangerous. Night, rest, and the rhythm of medieval life. As full darkness settles over the village, the family prepares for sleep. There are no streetlights, no electric illumination of any kind. The medieval night is profoundly dark in a way that modern people rarely experience. The only light comes from stars, moon, and the occasional flicker of firelight through cottage windows. Agnes banks the fire carefully, ensuring that embers will survive through the night, but won't pose a fire hazard. House fires are one of the greatest dangers in medieval villages, where thatched roofs and wooden structures can go up in flames within minutes. Every family develops elaborate rituals for fire safety, understanding that their lives depend on both having fire and controlling it. The family's sleeping arrangements reflect both their poverty and their practical approach to life. There is no separate bedroom. The entire family sleeps in the single room that serves as kitchen, workshop, and living space. Their bed is a simple wooden frame with ropes stretched across it, topped with a straw mattress and whatever coverings they can manage. In winter, they might bring their animals inside for warmth and protection. The body heat of a cow or pig can make the difference between comfort and misery during the coldest months. This arrangement might seem unsanitary to us, but it's practical and effective. And the medieval nose was accustomed to odors that would overwhelm modern sensibilities. Agnes and William share the bed with little Edmund, while Thomas and Mary sleep on simple pallets on the floor. Privacy is unknown. The family rises together, sleeps together, and lives in each other's constant presence. Yet, this closeness also creates strong bonds and mutual dependence that helps them survive in a harsh world. Before sleep, They say their evening prayers together. Medieval Christianity provides a framework that gives meaning to hardship, hope in times of despair, and a sense of purpose that transcends the immediate struggles of daily survival. The promise of heaven makes earthly suffering bearable, while the community of faith provides practical support and comfort. As they settle into sleep, the village grows quiet around them. Medieval nights are not silent. There are sounds that city dwellers never hear. The wind in the thatch, the movement of animals, the distant call of night birds, the crackle of dying fires. These sounds are familiar and comforting, part of the natural rhythm that has governed human life for countless generations. Seasonal rhythms and special occasions. Medieval life follows the ancient rhythm of seasons in ways that modern people have largely forgotten. Agnes and her family live according to a calendar that blends Christian feast days with agricultural necessities, creating a year marked by periods of intense work and blessed rest. Spring brings planting season, when every available hand is needed in the fields. Agnes might work alongside William, helping to prepare soil, plant seeds, and protect young crops from birds and weather. The children help too, learning the skills they'll need as adults, while contributing to the family's survival. This is also the time when winter stores run low. The preserved meat is nearly gone. The grain barrels are empty, and fresh vegetables are just beginning to appear in the garden. Medieval people called this the hunger gap. The dangerous weeks between the end of winter stores and the first summer harvest. Agnes has learned to stretch their resources through these lean times. She might make thin pottage last longer by adding more water and whatever wild greens she can find. Dandelion leaves, young nettle shoots, even tree bark in the most desperate times. Medieval people knew how to extract nutrition from sources we would never consider. Summer brings abundance, but also intense labor. The growing season is short, and every day counts. Agnes works in her garden from dawn to dusk, weeding, watering, and protecting her precious vegetables. She also begins gathering and preserving food for the winter ahead. This is when she collects herbs for medicine and cooking, drying them in bundles hung from the cottage rafters. She makes cheese if they have a cow or goat, preserving milk in a form that will last through the winter. She might gather berries and nuts from the forest, smoke fish caught in nearby streams, or help with the community effort to bring in the grain harvest. Autumn is perhaps the busiest time of all. This is when the year's survival is determined. Successful preservation of food means life, while failure means hunger or death. Agnes works frantically to store vegetables in root cellars. to smoke and salt meat, to brew enough ale to last through the cold months. The autumn pig slaughter is a community event that provides meat for multiple families. Nothing is wasted. The meat is cut and preserved, the blood made into pudding, the intestines cleaned and used as sausage casings, even the bones saved for soup. Medieval people understood the principle of using every part of an animal centuries before it became an environmental slogan. Faith, community, and the meaning of medieval life as our journey through Agnes's world draws to a close. It's important to understand that despite the hardships we've described, medieval people didn't see themselves as living in misery. They had a framework of meaning that made their struggles comprehensible and even noble. The medieval Christian worldview taught that earthly life was a test, a preparation for eternal joy in heaven. Suffering was not meaningless. It was an opportunity to grow in virtue, to share in Christ's passion, to earn reward in the afterlife. This belief system made even the hardest life bearable, even meaningful. Agnes doesn't think of herself as poor or oppressed. She understands her place in what medieval people called the great chain of being, a divinely ordered hierarchy that stretches from God down through angels, kings, nobles, and finally to peasants like herself. Her duty is to fulfill her role faithfully, just as William must serve his Lord, and the Lord must serve his King. This worldview also creates a strong sense of community. Everyone has a place, everyone has duties, and everyone depends on everyone else. The wealthy have obligations to the poor, just as the poor have duties to their superiors. It's not perfect justice by modern standards, but it creates a social safety net that helps people survive in uncertain times. The church calendar provides rhythm and meaning to the year. Christmas brings celebration even in the darkest winter weeks. Easter offers hope of renewal and resurrection. Saints' days provide opportunities for community celebration, for breaking the routine of daily work with feasting and festivity. These celebrations are more than just fun. They're essential for mental and spiritual health. They give people something to look forward to, opportunities to strengthen community bonds, and reminders that life contains joy as well as suffering. Agnes participates fully in these celebrations. She might help prepare special foods for feast days, contribute her skills to decorating the church, or join in the dancing and singing that marks important occasions. These moments of communal joy help balance the individual struggles of daily survival. Medieval people also find pleasure in simpler things than we might expect. A good harvest brings genuine celebration. A successful birth is cause for a community rejoicing. Even small improvements, a new tool, a successful trade, a house repair can provide deep satisfaction. They appreciate beauty in forms we might overlook. The pattern of sunlight through leaves, the sound of church bells across the countryside, the texture of well-woven cloth, the taste of fresh bread after a day of hard work. Medieval people developed sophisticated appreciation for the sensory pleasures available to them. Their relationships with each other are deeper and more complex than our brief acquaintance might suggest. Agnes and William have been married for 15 years, working side by side through seasons of plenty and scarcity. Their love is practical, but no less real for being unromantic by modern standards. They've shared the grief of losing children, the joy of successful harvests, the anxiety of uncertain times, and the satisfaction of seeing their surviving children grow strong and capable. Their marriage is a partnership forged by necessity, but strengthened by genuine affection and mutual respect. The children, too, have relationships and personalities that emerge despite the constraints of their circumstances. Thomas is developing the skills and confidence that will make him a successful farmer. Mary shows particular talent for spinning and weaving, abilities that will make her a desirable wife and capable household manager. Even little Edmund, despite his youth, is learning to find his place in the family and community structure. He helps with simple tasks, learns by watching and imitating, and absorbs the values and skills that will guide him through his own adult life. As we prepare to leave Agnes and her family to their rest, we should remember that their story is not one of unrelieved misery, but of human resilience, adaptation, and the universal search for meaning and community. They face challenges we can barely imagine, but they do so with courage, faith, and the support of neighbors who share their struggles. Medieval life was hard, often brutally so, but it was also meaningful, connected, and in its own way, complete. These people knew their purpose, understood their place in the world, and found ways to create joy and beauty even in the midst of hardship. Their world moves slowly, governed by seasons and weather rather than clocks and schedules. Their communities are small and intimate, bound together by necessity and mutual dependence. Their lives are short by our standards, but filled with the essential human experiences of love, work, faith, and hope. As Agnes settles into sleep beside her family, listening to the familiar sounds of the medieval night, she carries with her the satisfaction of a day's work completed, the comfort of loved ones nearby, and the faith that tomorrow will bring its own challenges and its own small victories. The medieval world sleeps, but it dreams of better harvests, of children grown strong, of communities at peace, of souls prepared for whatever lies beyond this earthly pilgrimage. These dreams sustain them through the darkness, and prepare them for another dawn. Another day of the endless, essential work of human survival and flourishing. And so we leave them, these ancestors of ours, whose struggles and triumphs echo still in our own lives, whose courage in a face of uncertainty reminds us that human beings have always found ways to create meaning, beauty, and community, even in the most challenging circumstances. Sleep well, Agnes and William, Thomas and Mary and little Edmund. Your story continues in all of us who remember that life, as deepest satisfactions, come not from ease or abundance, but from the simple miracle of human connection, the daily renewal of hope, and the eternal search for something greater than ourselves. Thank you for listening. I hope this story brought you peace and relaxation. Sleep well, and remember, history will always be here for you whenever you need comfort. Rest peacefully, knowing that the human story continues, that courage and love persist through every age, and that even in the darkest times, people find ways to create light. Sleep well and dream of the countless generations who came before us, each leaving their mark on the great tapestry of human experience.